Were the Liberals' reforms successful in meeting the needs of the British people? Introduction. Between 1906 and 1914, the Liberal government introduced a series of reforms. The reports of Booth and Rowntree found over 30% of people in London living in poverty. Additionally, with new Liberals in power, such as Winston Churchill and David Lloyd George, this helped to end the laissez-faire policy that was previously used. The Liberal reforms were designed to help the needs of the British people, such as the old, the young, the sick and unemployed. Overall, the reforms were successful in meeting the needs of the British people. Factor 1. The young. K. The Free School Meals, 1906. Act meant local councils were given the power to provide free meals for children from the poorest families. This meant local authorities were permitted to tax people to provide children with one free meal per school day. Ka. School Medical Inspections, 1907 Act meant doctors and nurses went into schools to give pupils medical checks and recommend any treatment. This made medical inspections in school compulsory, and a child would have at least 3 during their school career. Analysis. The Free Schools Meal Act was successful in meeting the needs of the British public because researchers found that the growth of children slowed and body weight often declined during school holidays. This was a success because it meant that needy pupils were now receiving one nutritious meal per day, and it allowed them to learn without the distraction of hunger. For example, by 1914, 14 million school children in Britain's schools were being fed each week. Analysis plus. However, the Free School Meals Act was limited in meeting the needs of the British people because poorer school children were still not being fed during school holidays or at weekends, so the effects were limited. Moreover, the provision of school meals was not compulsory for all local authorities, and in 1911 less than 1/3 of local authorities were providing the meals. Factor 2. The old. Ka. Everyone over the age of 70 was eligible for a state pension of 5 shillings per week, and a married couple would receive 7 shillings, 6 pence per week. Kk. The pension could be collected from the post office, which was a positive, as previously financial support had to be collected from the poorhouse. K. The pension was a great success and was very popular, with 970,000 old people benefiting from it by 1914. Analysis. The Pension Act. 1908 was successful in meeting the needs of the British people because for many older people it made life slightly more bearable financially and helped some older people from falling below the poverty line. Furthermore, it was a non-contributory pension, which meant the person did not have to pay towards it, so many benefited them as no individual contributions were required. Analysis plus. However, the Pensions Act was limited in meeting the needs of the British people because in poorer areas of cities life expectancy was around 45. So pensions at the age of 70 would help only the very few who lived long enough to collect it. Furthermore, many were excluded from claiming the pension, such as if they had been in prison in the previous 10 years. Factor 3. The sick. K. The National Insurance Scheme of 1911 applied to workers aged between 16 and 60, earning less than £160 a year. They would receive 9 shillings per week for 13 weeks, then 5 shillings for the next 13 weeks. K. It was a contributory system since each worker paid 4 pence a week toward the help they received. As well as receiving an income, workers were entitled to free medical treatment, including medicines, when they were off ill. Analysis. The National Insurance Act. 1911 was successful in meeting the needs of the British people because absence from work through sickness was a major cause of poverty. Therefore, any money coming in during sickness would help a family in need. It resulted in covering 15 million workers against poverty due to illness and not punish their poverty through the workhouses. Analysis plus. However, the National Insurance Act 1911 was limited in meeting the needs of the British people because the weekly contribution was in effect a wage cut, which might simply have made poverty worse in many families. They were further limited because the benefits were limited to a period of only 26 weeks. Many workers were ill for longer than this, so they would be plunged into poverty. Factor 4. The unemployed. K. For those struggling to find work, the Liberals passed the Labour Exchange Act 1909. Labour exchanges were places where workers could find a job. By 1914, around 3,000 people were finding work every day in Labour Exchanges K. With the National Insurance Part 2, workers in building construction could claim 7 shillings for a maximum of 15 weeks in any 12-month period if they became unemployed. Analysis: the National Insurance Act. 1911 Part 2 was successful in meeting the needs of the British people because it reduced the chances of poverty as people had 15 weeks to look for another source of income. This is shown as by 1913, 2.3 million were now insured against unemployment. The new labour exchanges also made it much easier to find new work. Analysis Plus, however, National Insurance Act 1911 Part 2 was limited in meeting the needs of the British people. It only covered for a maximum of 15 weeks, which meant after this period they would have no financial support. The Act was only meant to cover temporary unemployment and was limited to 7 trades such as shipbuilding and construction, so millions of workers in other industries had no protection from becoming unemployed.